This week I bring you a book from the Australian literary series published by Dalkey Archive Press. I initially misread this title and thought it said Barley Patch, but it's actually Barley Patch by Gerald Murnane. That seems slightly more logical. This book is about a man who spent his whole life reading and writing and contemplating literature until he decides to stop writing fiction entirely. But is it really possible to keep writing and stop writing fiction? It sounds simple at first, but truth and fiction can look a lot alike. That's especially true in Barley Patch, where Murnane constantly tricks you into thinking he's writing a story when he's actually writing about his past. And other events that look like his past turn out to be something else too, like dreams. And if you're talking about the past of a fiction writer, it's kind of hard to get around stories that he perhaps may have written in the past. So can you talk about those? The ambiguity Murnane creates by shifting in and out of the past and in and out of fiction makes this a book that's at times more theory than novel. The narrator spends most of his time contemplating deep questions like, what are we really talking about when we talk about fiction? What are writers doing when they write? Is there really any such thing as imagination? And if not, can there be any such thing as fiction to begin with? There are a number of books that engage these questions about reading and writing process, but what makes Barley Patch so special is the way that these questions here are tied up in the great problem of loneliness. The narrator writes to escape loneliness, to create characters that he can relate to, but the more he writes, the more he finds himself woefully gone from this world and lost in storyland. So, can fiction really be an answer to loneliness, or is it just the logical consequence of loneliness? For the narrator, must I write becomes bound up in a different question. Must I be lonely? One of the strange places this question leads is into the world of fiction to contemplate the particular loneliness of the fictional character. That loneliness is the loneliness of the great unknown, the great unwritten about and unread about that exists on the edge of all fiction books, everywhere. Wait, what? I'll let Murnane explain that one. I was free to suppose what I had always suspected. Many a so-called fictional character was not a native of some or another fictional text, but of a further region never yet written about. Such a character looked often from the region of the text towards that further region or dreamed about it. Such a character, perhaps, remembered often some or another personage who had never left that further region, but remained safely there, never mentioned or referred to in any passage of fiction. Now, I might try to glimpse in my own mind some of what might be glimpsed in the mind or remembered or dreamed of, but never written about. Now, I was justified in believing in the existence of places beyond the places that I had read about or had written about, of a country on the far side of fiction. But maybe it doesn't have to be so lonely to feel small against the backdrop of that infinite country on the far side of fiction. Maybe it can just be comforting to imagine it's there, that there are characters out there peering into reality as we peer curiously out. That was Barley Patch by Gerald Murnane, and I'll see you next week on Brave Little Books.